Mr. Stumbo, thank you for coming this evening and participating in answering some questions about the race for solicitor. We're trying to help the citizens to be more informed about the candidates and their views and positions. So if you're ready, we will begin. And I'll ask you first to take a moment or two and tell us a little bit about your background and what you would bring to the table as the solicitor.
Well, just Mr. Tripp, a little bit about my personal background is I'm from Greenwood County. Grew up in Greenwood, went to high school in Greenwood. Married a girl from Lawrence County who's from the Mountville area. She grew up on a little dairy farm out there. And so both of our families, her folks are still in the Mountville area, my folks are still in Greenwood. And we are just so glad to be home. A lot of my professional career I spent prosecuting around the state, but out of Columbia at the Attorney General's office. So we're delighted to be back. We're living here in Lawrence County now, and we're glad to be here. As far as my professional background, though, and what I would bring to the table as the next solicitor here in the 8th Circuit is I've been a prosecutor essentially my entire legal career. Which is about 8 years. This past year, I left the Attorney General's office. I was supervising the State Grand Jury Division for Attorney General Alan Wilson. For the few years preceding that, I'd been an assistant solicitor in Lexington, in the 11th Circuit for Solicitor Myers. Prosecuted everything from homicides to drug cases to child sex abuse, a little bit of everything in that office. And I started my career at the Attorney General's office under Attorney General McMaster, prosecuting internet crimes against children cases, which were very, very rewarding, but very disturbing as well, but also gave me a very good statewide exposure to being a prosecutor. I prosecuted a case during my two stints at the Attorney General's office. I prosecuted a case in every judicial circuit in the state, at least one in all 16 circuits. So I got to go to a lot of courtrooms, work with a lot of the solicitors statewide and see how they were doing cases in different parts of the state. And then obviously in Lexington as an assistant solicitor, prosecuted a ton of different types of cases as I just mentioned, but also had a very large docket. The docket I had probably was as large as anybody in our office, prosecuted thousands of warrants, and got to see how to really approach a large docket with limited resources, which I think is a problem statewide for our prosecution offices, as we need probably more attorneys to try to ease the case burdens a little bit. But I think that my experience there certainly has helped me to know how to run a solicitor's office, because I've worked hand in hand as an assistant solicitor in a circuit that's similar in size to this one. So what I bring to the table, I think, in summary here, is a passion for this area, being a native of this circuit and now a resident and raising my kids here. And Vanessa and our 4 children, as I said, are living here in Lawrence, so we care about this community, making sure that we don't have crime rampant in the streets and that we're bringing justice to criminals. But also have a passion for the prosecution area, having done that my entire career, and that's what I really, really love. So,
okay. What do you see is the function of the solicitor's job as opposed to just being an assistant solicitor or whatever? Do you see it as an administrative office primarily, or just supervisory, or?
I don't think it is. And I will say this, I think that the solicitors that you see in the courtroom that are actually leading in the courtroom are the more effective offices. And I've seen that around the state. The areas that are perceived to be tough on crime are the ones where the solicitor actually goes in, tries cases, gets convictions and long sentences. Fortunately, I was able to work in a circuit where that was the case. I think everybody in the Midlands knew you probably don't want to commit. You're going to commit a murder, you better not go across the river into Lexington County, because it's not a good place to be when you're on the other side of the solicitor in Lexington. A lot of that was because Solicitor Myers tried more death penalty cases than anybody in the country. And he was actually trying the cases and leading in the courtroom. I do think there is certainly an administrative component to being the solicitor. You have to manage attorneys. I think my experience at the Attorney General's office under Alan Wilson really has prepared me for that. I supervised a number of lawyers in that office that were going all over the state handling cases. And so that's a similar role that I'll have as a solicitor, supervising attorneys across a smaller area, 4 counties, as prosecutors. Also managing budgets, that's another component that as an assistant solicitor, you typically don't have to worry about the money and the budgets and how much you're going to have to spend on personnel and materials and the other aspects of running budgets and presenting budgets to county councils and requesting money from the state, from the legislature. So there's a number of things that are administrative that go along with it. That being said, it can't be all that. A solicitor has to be in the courtroom leading his people, because if you're not there as an example for your folks in court actually handling cases, then your folks probably aren't going to follow the lead of someone who's not there. I guess is the best way to put that. One of the best examples in the state that I know of right now is Strom Thurmond Jr. Strom Thurmond Jr. is a good friend of mine. He's more than just his daddy's name. I'll put it that way. He has done a phenomenal job as the solicitor down in the Second Circuit, which is Aiken County, Barnwell County, and Bamberg County. When he took office down there, there was a little bit of a bad relationship between law enforcement and the solicitor's office, and they totally turned that around at this point. And one of the reasons is, and I've witnessed this personally, having handled cases in his circuit, at the Attorney General's office, and when I was with the 11th Circuit, he referred a murder case to me, and I went down and they had a conflict of interest there, and I handled a murder case for Solicitor Thurmond. And when you go to the courthouse on a week of court in Aiken County, Solicitor Thurmond is there in the courtroom leading his people. I've seen him put up cases in front of court. I've seen him try cases. I've seen him put up guilty pleas and interact with the judges, and he's there. And it makes a huge difference because his people are there and they're working hard, and they see their leader doing the job. And so that's what I intend to bring to the table here is the next solicitor.
Okay, a final question along that line. Do you have a strategy or a plan with budget restraints, as you're talking about, and we don't know what the future exactly will bring, but of how to maximize, and you don't have to give all the details, but do you have a plan and a strategy to get the most bang for your buck, so to speak, in the solicitor's office in a constrained budget situation?
I do, and really the heart of that plan is developing very strong trial attorneys as our assistant solicitors, and having a team of prosecutors that are proficient in the courtroom. Not just proficient at trial, but they know how to size up a large docket and know how to prioritize cases. There's sort of the training component of the people you have, developing that group that can walk in a courtroom if you hand them a file and handle a case very quickly, get a case ready for court. I think that's critical for us to build the most effective attorneys we can have. So we have less people, that we have people that are and I think some of the folks in that office have a lot of potential. And I plan to really lead the attorneys there and develop a strong group of trial attorneys that are aggressive and that want to take cases to trial, especially the most important ones that involve violent crimes and crimes against children and some of our worst drug dealers. That we have a team of attorneys that any one person can handle any number of cases. And that's going to be the first thing, to develop that strength and that confidence with our attorneys. Secondly, though, is to maybe hire new talent, to be able to really identify young attorneys coming out of law school, which a lot of times that's what you end up with in the solicitor's office because you don't have as much money to pay. But taking those young attorneys and very quickly getting them ready to be strong courtroom attorneys, not just throwing them in and letting them sink or swim. To take them by the hand and say, listen, I have this murder case and I want you to try it with me. You take them through a couple times, let them try cases with you as the solicitor. It doesn't take long. And I had the privilege early in my career of having older, more seasoned, strong attorneys take me through. And so I think that's really the key. We have to maximize the efficiency of the people that we have. so we don't waste court time. I've heard that recently our solicitor's office in this circuit ends up with days of court where they break early and they don't have anything to do. And with the number of cases we have coming in, I don't see how that's possible. We ought to be keeping a week of court busy with cases. And so that I intend to have a strong group of attorneys there that have the ability to do that.
Okay. Of course, the drug problem is a problem everywhere. It's a really big problem in Lawrence County, and I assume in other places in the district. What do you plan to do that would be different in dealing with that particular problem? If you could give us a kind of a quick answer to that.
Well, I think you have to cut off the head of the source and the supply, and I think law enforcement would say the same thing. We need to work very closely with law enforcement and identify the most prolific drug dealers in our county. We need to find the ones that are cooking the most meth, the ones that are dealing the most crack cocaine, the ones that are growing copious amounts of marijuana and other drugs, and that are bringing them into this area, and make sure that we get the people that are making the money off this first. That has to be the first line of attack, is against the people that are the most effective at selling drugs. Secondly, I think that the second component of that is making sure we have a strong drug court program. There are a lot of people that just come through the system repeatedly, time and time again, and they're hopeless drug addicts. And for us as taxpayers to have to just pay for us to warehouse them in jails, I don't think it's the best answer. You know, a lot of these folks are just destitute. They may sell a little bit just to get their next fix. And we need to identify, and there again, work with law enforcement. The narcotics officers know who the ones on the street that are selling the drugs and who the ones are that are just more or less users. And so we need to have a strong drug court program, which is a diversion program. We have one here in the circuit that Solicitor Peace and others and Solicitor Jones before him have worked with. And to make sure we try to give folks that want to break the cycle of addiction and get out of that and have a steady job, that we give them that opportunity. The beauty of drug court as well is it's not a burden on the taxpayers. Drug courts are essentially self-sustaining programs. You get people in the program that have jobs, that pay their way through. And the incentive to them going through the drug court program and completing it is that they're not ultimately prosecuted at the end of the case. And I've seen some real major success stories come out of drug court. So I think we need to use that as well for those that are stuck in that cycle of addiction. And the ones that are preying on the people that are stuck in that cycle of addiction, the large dealers and traffickers, we need to take them off the streets and send them away for as long as we can put them away for them.
Okay. You, of course, are running as the Republican candidate for solicitor. And of course, in law enforcement, we normally don't attach too much significance to that, but it does tell us something about people. What is there about the Republican policies or platforms that relate to law enforcement that would attract you to be a Republican and run as a Republican?
Well, I think in recent years, Republicans have been more of a friend of law enforcement generally. I think that's you know, as far as specifics, I think the Republican Party platform certainly lines up with me personally. And I'll say that as a person who's grew up in the pro-life movement. My mother took me to Washington, D.C. as a child when they had the Rally for Life every year on the Mall of the Capitol. And so pro-life issues have always been very near and dear to my heart. I was on the board of directors at the Crisis Pregnancy Center in Columbia, and my wife was a volunteer there when we lived in Columbia. And the Republican Party platform is very strongly against abortion and seeks to have it not legal anymore. And that's certainly, on a personal level, is something that I support. But more generally, as far as law enforcement issues, the Republican Party is generally more tough on crime. A lot of the predominant, should I say this, predominant or prominent Democrats in this state are criminal defense attorneys. And they're obviously on the other side of the fence from prosecutors, and quite often, the Republican platform and values line up more with prosecutors than they do with the Democratic side. So that just on a personal level would be why I chose to run as a Republican. I haven't always voted for every Republican candidate. I do keep an open mind on candidates and positions, and I can't think of any time where I voted straight party Republican, because I think that it's important to look at the candidate and the man, not the party. But as a general rule, I think the Republican Party's platform lines up with me personally and with a tough on crime approach.
Okay. And the last question would be, what is it that you see as the major differences between you and Mr. Shealy, who is the other candidate for this office?
Well, I think I have a statewide experience, and that's probably the biggest difference. I think Mr. Shealy and myself would agree on a lot of the methods on the running of a solicitor's office. And Mr. Shealy is a fine person and a good attorney, and I've met him and interacted with him on a number of occasions, and I think we would agree on a number of issues. But I think as far as experience, I've been able to see on the state level how things are run. I've also worked with a lot of federal agencies. I've worked with state agencies. I work with local agencies all over the state. I've seen how different solicitors' offices run. And working on a state level also, and having the ability to see the way the legislative process works up close and personal. My office, the Attorney General's office, was right across the lawn from the State House, and so we were very close to what was going on as far as in the legislature and funding. I think that's going to be one of the major fights for law enforcement in tough budget times, is to make sure that being a core function of government, that we're being funded properly. And I think a lot of that has, you have to build relationships in the legislature and with your county councils. And I do think my experience on the state level, being close to the legislature and having the ability to try to build better funding for our solicitor's office is going to be very critical. And I think that's one thing that does set me apart from Mr. Shealy, that statewide exposure. I've tried a lot of cases, and I've tried in a lot of different places around the state. And I think my experience, and if you look at my record, I think it speaks for itself.
Okay, Mr. Stumbo, we thank you for coming and participating again this evening. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.